Hey everybody, welcome. This is Jeff with All Keys Pro, coming at you today with a different kind of subject. I've been thinking a lot about how, as keyboard players, synthesizer players, there's a sort of expectation for us to come to the gig with lots of different patches, lots of different presets. And on some gigs, it's really necessary if you're doing certain tunes with certain kind of parts that you have to play, especially if you're playing like cover tunes or something. But if you're playing like some music that's a little bit more original-ish, a little bit more open, and there's like sort of less expectations about how the synthesizer is supposed to sound, then maybe the synthesizer becomes more like a saxophone or a violin, where it has a sound of its own, rather than a sound that duplicates a bunch of other sounds or produces a bunch of other sounds. So I have done a few gigs like this with I'm looking down because my Moog grandmother is right here. There she is. Isn't she lovely? I've done some gigs with her as being my only synthesizer. I'm playing maybe Rhodes or piano, maybe organ, and then using the Moog. And I'm using the Moog like it's sort of like a expressive solo voice. So I am going into the gig understanding that the Moog has a certain kind of sound, a certain texture, and a certain quality, a certain personality sonically. And I'm not trying to fight that. I'm actually trying to bring out the best in it and using that as a form of expression, as like a guitarist would. A guitarist doesn't come to the gig with a bunch of presets. Of course, he's got his effects rack, his pedal rack, his pedal board, which gives him different sounds, but it's much less sort of preset oriented as it is, just wanting certain sort of tones out of his amp. So, in a like sort of way, I've done some gigs like that with the Moog, and I have to tell you, it has deepened my relationship with the instrument. And I've become more interested in the subtleties of it and the expressiveness of it, and sort of fallen in love with it more than perhaps I would have if I were playing, say, the sequential Pro 3, which I also love, but I might show up with, 100 presets or 10 presets per tune or 10 presets for the whole night that I'm using for the gig. This guy has no presets. What you see is what you get. You look down, you look at the knobs, that's what it is. So I know as keyboard players we sort of fought this for years because there were no presets on synthesizers for a long time, and we wanted to have presets. So I went from that in my synthesizer history to the DX7, which had thousands of presets, and it became a preset instrument, and there were so many sounds that were available that very few people programmed them. I programmed it. I never enjoyed it, but I did program it. But it became much more economically and time-wise viable time-wise, just to grab bunches and bunches of sounds and have a bunch of different possibilities of sounds that you could use on gigs. And honestly, I grew to hate that. And I still have this aversion to modern synthesizers, which I sort of perceive as being sort of preset kind of instruments. The Korg Wave State is one that comes to mind, that it just feels like it sounds great, but there's all these complexities and textures, and it just becomes, I think, very much a preset instrument. And I've even seen people giving demos of it online, and even people who know it really well sort of get frustrated about, oh no, this is not up, or or this is not working, or oh, I have to go to this page and do this. And it's just not how I'm interested in making music. I have this way that I've set up. Got some notes here so I don't forget. I have some ways that I've set up my grandmother that's sort of like as a player instrument. I've set it up so like as when I'm playing it, I feel the most comfortable and I feel like it's the most expressive. My grandmother right now, the mod wheel is not working. So I need to take it in and get that fixed. But since that's not working, I patched around it. So I took the wave out of the modulation source, and I patched that to the pulse wave modulation in on oscillator 1 and to the linear FM in on oscillator number 2. Which allows me to get that kind of vibrato kind of expressivity. And having done that, I've come up with this, way without using the wheel to dial in a little bit of sort of width to the sound. So here's with no modulation, and here's bringing in some LFO. This sort of widens the image. With a little bit of that LFO. So that's one thing. I love the patchability of the grandmother. I spent a couple years getting into Eurorack. I eventually found that it kind of wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't really what I love to do as far as being a musician. But I learned, I feel like I got my master's or my doctorate in subtractive synthesis by really getting into the Eurorack, because when you put it together, it doesn't make any sound. you have to start from the beginning and learn how things work and how things modulate and how gates work and all that kind of stuff. So that knowledge has served me in an instrument like the grandmother and here to my right the matriarch. So I love those instruments. So at any rate, I have also patched the keyboard velocity out to the envelope in, envelope amount in, and to the VCA amount in. So I get this touch sensitivity. So it's very, very sensitive. Which just gives it a little bit more of a human sort of sound. So not all of the notes are exactly the same volume. Yeah, I really love that. So that's sort of my patch for live, the keyboard velocity out to the envelope amount in, and also I'm just using a little mult, one of these little, I don't know if you can see this guy. So this could be 1 in and 5 out, but I'm just using 1 in and 2 out. Can you see that little guy? It's pretty cool. Yeah, back from my Eurorack days. Took me the longest time in Eurorack to figure out you could take one signal and just like push it in 10 different places at the same time. So this is sort of where I start as far as how to think about the instrument as far as just kind of playing it live. I've come up with sort of 3 or 4 different basic kind of sounds that I like to go to and that I can go to really quickly live without having to think too much. So the first one is just like kind of like a ballad kind of a patch, and I might just use one oscillator. Let's see, oscillator 2 on a triangle wave. Little glide works great with this. Take a little bit of the attack off. And Joe Zawinul used this patch, this kind of sound, on his ARP 2600 quite a bit. If he's playing like on a ballad or something. So that's a good place to start. It's soft. That's just one oscillator. Then I like to set my second oscillator on a square wave, a pulse wave, and to bring that in. It's immediately brighter. So I brought the cutoff down a little bit. You have to kind of really open that cutoff frequency up pretty wide to get the triangle wave to kind of speak and be not really, really soft. So this is about 50% triangle wave, 50% pulse wave. Bit of attack. It's still pretty gentle sound. You know, I think an analog synthesizer can really overwhelm a band, so having this sort of ability to be a little bit subtle. Also, it gives if we're playing solos, it gives us some place to go. We're just like not slamming in at forte and really, really bright. So there's that. And then there's a patch which is sort of specific to something I love to do with, let's see, oscillator 1. These are both going to be on sawtooth waves. So oscillator 1 is going to be at 16 feet, and oscillator 2 is going to be at 2 feet. So. This is again kind of a gentle-ish kind of a sound, but it can be pretty funky too. Can add maybe a little resonance. I have the cutoff at about 200 hertz, and when I'm playing live, I'm always playing with the cutoff amount and also the decay amount of the envelope. So that's the decay really open, and then. And I call this sort of like my bass clarinet flute kind of sound. So I just moved the 2 foot to the 4 foot. Super expressive sound, I love that. So now we've got the bass clarinet flute sound, and we have the triangle sort of Zawinul sound. Then I also think that there is two lead sounds which historically are important and easy to dial up. And I think of these live as having two different sort of textures. And one of them is, I call it the George Duke sound. Let's see here. So I am using oscillator 1 on a pulse width again, oscillator 2 on a sawtooth. So George did this thing. George Duke did this thing where he would take the decay of the envelope. You could just hear that, just kind of like almost like a click. I have both of my oscillators on 4 feet now. So then he would bring the cutoff up. So doing this, there's always a little bit of fiddling, like where we want that. So the basic tone there is still, I think, kind of on the mellow side. But you get this little pop at the beginning. Like I'm bringing up the decay now. So here's the decays all the way off, all the way down. Just a little pop. And that's kind of nice too. So that's a nice sound. So there's the George Duke sort of preset. And then, it's not a preset, sound. And then I will think about the next sort of category of lead sounds is the Chick Corea stuff. So the Chick stuff is brighter. So I am just going to leave the cutoff frequency at about the same, and I'm going to start to open up this envelope decay. And I just went to 2 sawtooth waves. Again, I can bring the decay down. I always kind of like that. I always like a little bit of a short decay. And one note which is I think of interest to us Moog guys. I have the VCA mode in keyboard release. So it's just sort of an attack decay, or actually attack release. I was right the first time, attack decay. So the envelope then is affecting the filter more than the VCA. So you get a little bit of subtlety as far as the shape of the sound. So we're getting to kind of a Chick thing. It can be as bright as you want it to be. And with all of these sounds, the way I have this set up, if I dial in a little bit of the LFO modulation, it gets wider. So that's with, this is without. And And I find that to be much more useful, frankly, and interesting than just detuning the oscillators. It seems like a lot of people detune oscillators. I've never been that big of a fan of it. It always kind of just sounds like the instrument's out of tune to me. So let's see. I'll detune oscillator 2 a little bit. I don't know. There's in tune with a little bit of LFO modulation. It's a much more, to my ears, a much more interesting sort of, it's not as static of a sound. You get a little bit more movement, not that much movement. So there's the Chicoria stuff. And if you know, this is not really Chicoria, but a synthesis thing. The way I have this patch, if you just crank the LFO speed, the rate up really high, it'll start to become audio rate stuff. I'll check it out. Yeah, that can be fun and crazy and wild. One more note, which I should mention, is so the grandmother and many monosynthesizers, which are of this ilk, have no effects. So actually, this has the spring reverb, the grandmother. There's a spring reverb. I don't love it. It's okay, but I am actually patched through a dispatch master, an Earthquaker device reverb. Dispatch master, which has delay and reverb. I can crank it up a little bit so you can hear it more. Yeah, which gives it a little bit of a little bit more kind of audio interest, I think, to have a little bit of reverb. So yeah, so there's that. So there's Chick Bright. There's a little bit more mellow. So again, the envelope decay is turned down pretty low there. I'm bringing it up. And then I'm bringing up the cutoff a little bit. Cutoff is at about 400 hertz there. If I bring down the decay here, and guys, a sound like that can be really useful on a gig if you're like, say you're playing some counter lines behind a singer, or behind a horn player, like they're playing a melody and they're ba-ba-doo-day, bo-doo-doo-day-do, instead of this ba-ba-doo-day, bo-doo-doo-day-do, where your tone and volume, frankly, can actually overwhelm the lead instrument. So it's really useful. This relationship between the filter cutoff and the envelope decay. I have the sustain at about 2/3 or 1/3 of the way up. This is with the sustain all the way down. Here's with 1/3. And finding the sweet spots, the grandmother has tons of sweet spots. Finding the sweet spots with this instrument is not an exact science, and I think I sort of, I'll look and, it's like just over the third little bar, but something else in real time, something else can be affecting that a little bit. So, but I find that sort of give and take to be really interesting and wonderful and fun. So So there's the George Duke sort of George Duke idea of a lead sound, and then there's the Chick Corea lead sound, the Zawinul lead sound, which is kind of like the fluty triangle wave. There's one more that I love to go to, and see if I can get this going here. So this is like, I call it the early Herbie Hancock sound. So it's oscillators in octaves, some resonance, I have the K down pretty far. And so this is really funky, and you know, if you're playing like, yeah, that can be really fun. I love doing that. And again, live, you can play with how much resonance you want, how much modulation. No modulation. Oh, that's funky. I just turned the cutoff down. So the resonance is actually at about 2/3, and the cutoff is actually below 200. And by the way, I have keyboard tracking at 1 to 2. I find that to be the best for what I like to do. So that's pretty funky, right? That's fun. Oh, and the glide is actually fun with this too. I forgot that. And then if you bring the resonance down, so all I did there is just bring the resonance down, and I turned the modulation off. So 2 oscillators as sawtooth, 2 sawtooths, and in octaves, so I'm 8-foot and 4-foot. So here's oscillator 1, here's oscillator 2. Cool. One more thing I want to talk about as far as technique and performing on this instrument. Since I have the keyboard on keyboard release, and I'm doing this keyboard velocity to the envelope amount and the VCA amount, I can get these sort of subtle. You have to have the cutoff set at the right. So that I'm just playing legato. I'm connecting all the notes. And here's detaching, détaché. So you can sort of the cutoff amount has to be up a little bit, because if it's too low, you're not getting really enough frequency to work without that decay portion of the envelope. So all of this put together kind of adds up to a very expressive instrument. The more I play the grandmother, the more I love it, actually. Before I bought the grandmother, I had a Moog Sub 37, and I thought, in fact, I said out loud many times, I can't live without the Sub 37. And one day I was in a music store, which will go unnamed, a really famous one, and they had a grandmother sitting right next to a Sub 37, and I played one and I played the other, and at that point I owned the Sub 37, and I was shocked at the sort of lack of depth of tone that I heard on the Sub 37, and just the beautiful kind of openness to the sound of the grandmother. The grandmother to me really sounds like the synths from the 70s that Moog was making. It kind of has a Moog Rogue kind of vibe to it. This, you know, two oscillators, but really, really beautiful. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, guys. I'll come at you. I'm going to make some tracks for the next video and play a little bit with the tracks and kind of demonstrate on how I can sort of build a solo by the notes that I'm playing and the space that I'm leaving, but also with the sound and how I'm kind of opening up the sound as it moves through the solo. So I will see you soon. If you like it, please like and subscribe. Trying to grow the channel so I can bring you more and more of this content. So, all right, that's it for today. Peace out.